Hello, fellow history aficionados and space enthusiasts. Join us as we embark on a thrilling expedition through the pages of history to uncover the riveting tale of the Cold War and space race. In this captivating journey, we'll traverse the icy terrain of Cold War politics and ascend into the cosmos, exploring the intense rivalry between two superpowers that unfolded on both global and celestial stages. From the ideological battlegrounds to the race to conquer the final frontier, we'll delve deep into the heart of this era where science, technology, and the quest for supremacy converged in a battle unlike any other. The Cold War and space race were two of the world's most important events during the 20th century. While they didn't happen at the same time, the two are linked by their ideologies, geopolitics, and diplomatic developments. The space race was a competition between the United States and Soviet Union to discover new technologies that would allow each nation to become more powerful militarily and economically. The Cold War was an ideological conflict between Western democratic countries led by America and Soviet-led communist nations like Russia. Both conflicts had enormous effects on global politics and society until they ended with the collapse of communism in Eastern Europe in 1989. The Cold War and space race. The Cold War was a global geopolitical rivalry between the United States and Soviet Union that lasted from 1945 to 1945 to 1991. It was characterized by competition, espionage, and proxy wars. The space race was a global competition between these two superpowers to explore outer space, especially through manned missions by astronauts on board spacecraft such as Vostok 1, 1961, and Apollo 8, 1961. The space race began in 1957 when the Soviet Union launched Sputnik 1 into low Earth orbit, making it Earth's first artificial satellite. This event triggered both nations to increase funding for their own space programs so that they could compete with each other in this new arena of technological innovation. Cold War tension. The Cold War was a global ideological and geopolitical conflict between the United States, its allies, and the Soviet Union. It started after World War I.e., when the Soviet Union and the United States emerged as two superpowers. The two countries competed with each other economically, politically, and militarily for global influence. They also engaged in espionage activities against each other's governments to gain information about military technology or political plans that could give them an advantage over their rivals in any future conflicts between them. Space exploration. In the 1950s and 1960s, space exploration was a major priority for the United States and USA. Both nations were interested in exploring outer space, but each had different reasons for this goal. The Soviet Union was first to launch a satellite into orbit around Earth, Sputnik 1, send an animal into orbit, Laika, send a man into space, Yuri Gagarin, and land on the moon, Alexei Leonov. Geopolitical rivalry. The Cold War was a period of geopolitical rivalry between the Soviet Union, USSR, and the United States of America. The two countries had different ideologies and geopolitical interests, which led to conflict between them. The USA believed in communism as its economic system, while the USA practiced capitalism. As part of this competition for power, both nations competed fiercely in various events such as space exploration and military drills. Cold War ideologies. The United States and the Soviet Union were both capitalist and communist, liberal and conservative, democratic and totalitarian. They had many commonalities that led them to clash in a global superpower struggle over ideology. The two superpowers were similar in many ways. Both countries were based on capitalism but had socialist aspects. They were both liberal democracies with autocratic tendencies. They had similar political systems, though not necessarily the same system. They even shared some values. And yet they fought bitterly over which set of values should prevail worldwide. The Cold War was thus driven by two competing visions for how society should be organized: democracy vs. communism, socialism. Free market Vs, planned economy, individual rights, Vs collective rights. Space achievements. The space race was an international competition between the USSR and the United States. The goal was to put a man on the moon, but it also served as an opportunity for each country to show off its technological superiority. The Soviets' first major achievement was Sputnik 1, which was launched into orbit in 1957 by Soviet cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin, who became famous for being first human in space. This satellite was big news because it showed that Russia had developed rockets powerful enough to launch objects into space, and therefore might be able to send humans into orbit or beyond. In 1961, President John F. Kennedy announced his intention for America's space program, landing men on the moon by 1970's deadline. The Apollo 11 mission accomplished this goal in 1969, with Neil Armstrong becoming first person ever walk on moon's surface, while Buzz Aldrin followed him shortly after their arrival onto lunar surface, where both spent 2 hours exploring surroundings before returning back home safe sound via. Saturn V rocket launcher, which took off from Launch Complex 39E at Cape Canaveral Air Force Station Space Center, Florida, USA. The arms race was a competition between the Soviet Union and the United States. It was a result of the Cold War, which began after World War IE, when both sides were competing for global dominance. The two countries became locked into this struggle as they tried to outdo each other in terms of military strength, technological innovation, and economic power. The arms race began as early as 1947, when both sides tested their first nuclear weapons, atomic bombs. From then on, it escalated rapidly. By 1950, there were over 1 million troops stationed along the border between East Germany and West Germany. By 1955, there were 5 million. By 1960, there were 10 million. By 1960, there were 10 million. This led up until 1991, when there were 25 million soldiers on either side, ready at any moment to fight if need be. But fortunately, it never happened, because just before Christmas 1990, one Mikhail Gorbachev resigned from office, leaving Boris Yeltsin behind him, who changed everything drastically with it, weeks after taking over power from him. Space technology is a key component of the Cold War. It has advanced since then, and it continues to be used in many different fields. Space technology is important for national security because it allows us to know what other countries are doing in space and allows us to protect ourselves from attacks on our satellites or spacecraft. Cold War diplomacy. During the Cold War, diplomacy was used to prevent a nuclear war. Diplomats of both sides negotiated alliances and treaties to prevent the spread of communism or democracy in countries where it already existed. The United States and its allies formed NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization, in 1949 as a military alliance against Soviet expansionism, while the Soviet Union created Comecon, Council for Mutual Economic Assistance, in 1949 as an economic union between Eastern European states under Soviet control. These two superpowers also competed for influence worldwide through their respective propaganda machines. Voice of America on one side, Radio Moscow on the other. Space discoveries. Space exploration has led to many discoveries. It has led to the discovery of planets, moons, asteroids, and comets in our solar system. Space exploration also helped us learn about the universe and its structure. Cold War legacy. The Cold War is over, but the legacy of the space race continues. In fact, it's never been more relevant than it is today. Space exploration has continued since the end of the Cold War and continues to be an international effort, with many nations participating in missions to outer space. The effects of this global superpower struggle were felt far outside those two countries' borders. It sparked innovation in technology, science, and engineering. It encouraged scientific research across disciplines, and it led to advancements in communication technology, including satellite communications, that still benefit us today via GPS systems used by smartphones or apps like Google Maps or Uber rideshare services. The space race between America and Russia also helped spur other nations on their own paths toward becoming superpowers themselves. and eventually led up until now, where we have several emerging economies vying for world dominance alongside established powers like China or India or Brazil, etc. There's still plenty happening when thinking about how far back into history one can go before reaching some sort of conclusion about whether superpower status lasts forever. The Cold War and space race are linked through ideologies, geopolitics, diplomacy, and technology. Ideologies. The Cold War was a war of ideologies that pitted the United States against the Soviet Union. The two countries had opposing views on how governments should be run and what role they should play in their citizens' lives. They also disagreed on how to solve problems such as poverty or hunger around the world, and even within their own borders. Geopolitics. Geography played an important role in shaping both conflicts because each superpower wanted control over land near key resources like oil fields or shipping lanes, so they could strengthen their economies by selling these goods abroad without having to pay high prices for them at home. First, diplomacy. Diplomacy refers to negotiations between countries aimed at resolving disputes peacefully, rather than resorting immediately back into war mode like most people would expect, given how many times we've seen this happen throughout human history before now. But it doesn't always work out perfectly either. Technology. Technology refers to all kinds of different things depending upon which field one studies within academia. However, here I'll just use technology loosely enough so that everyone understands what I mean without having spent too much time explaining myself beforehand. The Cold War and space race are linked through ideologies, geopolitics, diplomacy, and technology. The tensions between the Soviet Union and the United States led to a global struggle for power that manifested itself in many different ways, including space exploration. This rivalry resulted in many achievements, such as the first man landing on the moon or satellites being launched into orbit around Earth, but also caused a lot of harm by increasing tensions between countries, which could potentially lead to nuclear war. As we conclude our odyssey through the tumultuous waters of the Cold War and the soaring heights of the space race, let us remember the lessons of history that echo through the corridors of time. The legacy of this era reminds us of the fragility of peace and the boundless potential of human exploration and cooperation. The pursuit of knowledge and the reach for the stars have transcended political boundaries, demonstrating the remarkable unity of humanity in the face of monumental challenges. If this expedition into the nexus of Cold War dynamics and space exploration has ignited your curiosity, we invite you to show your support by liking this video and subscribing to our channel. Together, we'll continue to uncover the mysteries of the past and the marvels of the universe.